Welcome everyone to Connecting with Youth, a place for all generations who want to connect with youth and support youth empowerment. As part of Connecting with Youth, we have discussions with Tykee James, co-founder of Amplify the Future, and Jack Thompson, president of Fridays for the Future in Delaware and policy advisor for National International Fridays for the Future. I will begin by asking our guest questions and then open up to you all for the last 10 minutes of the session. Any content questions you have, please send to Ask Me Jake. Any logistic questions, please send to Zoom host Mary Allen. I have the privilege of getting to know Tykee and Jack better as we prepared for the plenary in this session for today, as well as planning for youth empowerment and allyship at Bowie State University tomorrow. Let's begin this session by launching a poll to see the different generations we have in the audience. Mary Ellen, will you launch the poll? Okay, so everybody sees the poll. It's a very simple question. Which generation? Oh, fantastic. Okay, we're at 24%, we're at 40%. Let's see, let's give it another 10 seconds. We have 59%, 62. Can we get past 70% participants? Okay, I think, Mary Ellen, do you want to, so you got 2 more seconds left. 1 second, 2 seconds. If you could close the poll and share it, we have 70% participation. All right, so you can see, I'm just gonna take a screenshot because these for some reason do not save when we have the recording. We do have people from all generations, but clearly we have a lot more baby boomers than Gen Z, okay. So this, we wanted to get a sense of who's here so that we can hopefully edit a little bit about what we discuss as part of that. So Tykee and Jack, I don't know if you want to comment on, were you surprised at the audience, or just keeping in mind that the audience is really here to support youth empowerment, right?
Right, and it's good to see that we have people here with a range of experience in being a youth. That is one thing, no matter what, we all have in common. We've been a youth before, and you know, our proximity to it may help inform our perspectives, but should not drive us apart. And so I'm glad that everybody can be together in that. Jack, you have anything to add?
Ditto. Also, either way, I would have said any age you are, as long as we're here to fight, as long as we're here to give everything we have, then it doesn't matter, you know.
Right on.
Yeah, thank you both for that. It seems to me that what is essential is to have intergenerational conversations about what it means to empower youth. So thank you all for coming and being part of this conversation. Let's begin in the context that we're in for youth in 2020. Youth today have more information dumped on them than any other generation, far more information. And my concern is that as humans, we generally tend to focus on negative comments and messaging. So I can only imagine what it must be like to wade past the negative messaging and find empowerment. One of the themes that came up during our preparations was how one becomes empowered. During one of these conversations, Tykee shared that we need to find moments that define each of us. So could each of you two share some moments that define you towards empowerment, that led you to the accomplishments that you have had, you know, as young men? For example, Tykee, what led you to all of your work to advocate for nature and people as government affairs coordinator, founder of Black Birders Week, and nonprofit organizations to support youth?
Well, for me, it was making a decision when I was a senior in high school that I wanted a job that was a lot different from a lot of the jobs that my friends were getting. You know, where I wouldn't be working inside, I'd be working outside. I'd be identifying plants and animals that maybe I've seen or never seen before. And I was in a position to just learn a lot and get paid while I learned. And I decided that that was something that I saw a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential. So I took it seriously early on, even though at the time going from high school to college, while I was in college, even though I was studying math, computer science, and teaching, I was always, working in the field of wildlife conservation, working in the aspects of identifying and connecting people with nature. Now a couple of years later, I'm seeing myself helping with political strategy around the idea of wildlife conservation, but the same principles of what made my environmental education experience so meaningful still follow me into how I try to educate folks on important topics of the environment. um, and further, some of these moments happen when I'm out birding, when I'm connecting with people. And it's often when we're able to point at the thing that we're trying to protect, or when we're talking about the bird stories that everybody has. I've never met anyone who doesn't have a story about birds. It's those moments that I feel like can not just define that experience, but define us as people. That we are always in a pattern of uh, recognition in some way or another. We are always in this pattern of having a relationship with wildlife, and having a relationship to the land that we share. Uh, those moments out with the birds are really those moments for me.
Thanks so much, Tykee. So, Jack, can you share some defining moments that empowered you to lead Fridays for the Futures in Delaware, meet with so many legislatures and policy advisors, and then, step up to advising Fridays for the Future, national, international?
Yeah, I mean, I think just I liked the point that you had about the bombardment of information. I think that's something that really is a difficult thing to manage as a young person, and kind of not knowing like where to get it from. Like it feels like everything is just so like politically charged, I'm coming into this issue that shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? And you see how partisan it gets, and it really does frustrate you to no end. And I think realizing just like the staggering nature of how bad this can really be if we don't stop it, or if we don't even try to stop it, there I always like the conversations we have like around like an environmental science class, whenever you're talking about like, all right, so I'm the exception, I can drive this gas car, but what happens when the entire state drives this gas car? What happens when this entire country drives this gas car? This entire country is what, 300 million people. That's sizable chunk out of the global population, but it's not that much. All of the stuff that we're putting into the air right now in the way of CO2 is really going to come back to bite us. And I think just the enormous scale of it is really frightening. One of the things recently that kind of gave me a new pep in my step was the news about the glacier that detached in either the Antarctic or Greenland. I honestly don't know. I didn't do enough research on that, but it was something about like 200 billion gallons of water being released into the ocean from that melting. I mean, that's a lot. Obviously, that's not going to drive it up 6 feet right now, but it adds up. It really does. I mean, like the little stuff, even though that's not little, obviously, but like the more the little stuff really does add up, and that's kind of a frightening thing around climate stuff. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to point out, that it can feel overwhelming that you're one of really 7.7 billion people, and certainly one in 300 million people in the US. I think one of the things that I want to point out, that even though the US is less than 5% of the world's population, we use about 20 to 25% of the world's resources and energy, right? So this is where one place that we actually have leverage to do system changes. And Jack, I know in the plenary you pointed out the power of being an American. And I hear you taking that on really seriously, that even though you can feel so powerless as one person in 7.7 billion people, the fact is that as an American, you have so much power. And one of the things that I often find when working with youth is that it's hard for me to convince young people that Congress really want to hear their voice, and that they actually have a powerful voice. And so one of the questions that I like to discuss with you and the larger audience is just these barriers to empowering youth, right? And maybe we could start with the simple, really concrete one of, how do you convince young people that we want to hear their voice, and Congress wants to hear their voice, and that we will support them in amplifying that voice.
So my first thoughts on that, I think a lot of kids get almost scared off of being in any kind of like political group. I'm clicking my pen a lot. I think that might be creating some noise. I'm sorry. But yeah, they get scared off by like the idea of being in any kind of political sense, because we've been looking at like these last 4 or 5 years of a Trump presidency, really, where people have been more emboldened to be more like openly violent, to be more openly just racist, xenophobic, anything. So like when you open your mouth as a kid, you don't want to sign up to get verbally abused. You don't want to sign up to get threats in the mail. You don't want to sign up to get any of that. Like you're just a high school kid, right? Like, and I think a lot of people see how crazy like some of the opposition can be. And it really does frighten them off. And that's a crazy thing that we have to deal with as kids. And it might somewhat be unfounded. I mean, I haven't gotten any death threats yet. So I mean, that's nice. But you know, I mean, it is definitely a fear that's in the youth community as well. Like, and I know just feeling fear, especially even talking about it with your friends. You know, like you don't talk politics with your friends, and then when you do, if you find out that they're so different than you, and like you have this fear of, well, what if this creates like a void in any kind of like open kind of like talking relationship, you know, that, and it's just a crazy thing, you know, and I think that really contributes to them not being able to, and youth in general just being a lot more shy about like being vocal in Congress. Sorry if I drew it on a little bit.
Those are great points, Jack. I mean, it's scary to have negative comments thrown at you. I can't imagine what it must be like when you're young, right? I mean, I've had nasty comments thrown at me all the time for writing simple things about how grateful I am to be an immigrant. And I've actually gotten a death threat as a university employee, right? So, I mean, I get the environment that we operate in, that people seem emboldened to toss things out. And, you know, I'm much older than you, so I can take it because I sort of have hopefully some, I don't know what word, but maybe some experience. But I can't imagine what it would be like, you know, at 16, 17 to feel like you can't speak out because somebody's gonna really put you down or even give you a death threat. Anyway, Tykee, did you want to add to that?
Absolutely. Awareness of your well-being and your livelihood and dignity are important aspects to protect, especially when the identity of your livelihood and the identity of your dignity are still being formed, especially when you're younger. I do want to remind folks, however, that the most powerful movements that have happened in this country have happened because and with young people. That it is the work of young people being underestimated that often is the the precursor to momentous change. Now, when I talk about what it means to, make a difference in your community, I try to make it clear that what I'm talking about is a job. I'm talking about getting paid to do this. I'm talking about making a living. And it's not just about, passion and principle, but it's about getting paid. And there are opportunities that I'm trying to shift with Amplify the Future that can empower folks to find positions where they can directly challenge the role of power in society, in the workplace, the things that keep the conditions of their community so, the things that are attached to the status quo. We should know by now the status quo is unsustainable, right? We can't keep doing what we're doing and expect everything's going to be okay. Meaningful things, making meaningful differences in people's lives is also a core tenet of a meaningful movement. Talking, in broad ways about the facts isn't making a meaningful difference in anyone's life. Now they know things, cool. I know things, but the meaningful difference happens with direct service. And that direct service can look in a lot of different ways, but movements always provide that. And when I'm talking specifically with anyone, actually, not just with young people, I try to identify this importance of understanding your own self-interest, right? Because the movement that can provide a direct service and create this change, well, that movement is born of people who have self-interest and people who, with transparency of what their self-interest is, work mutually for the benefit of everyone else, work collectively for the benefit of everyone else, even though this is my self-interest, this is what I'm getting out of this. And what I'm getting out of this is personally meaningful to me because it will help me live, it will help me do whatever. It is meaningful to me, and that's what is the self-interest, not just that I like it, And so it's like thinking about and trying to get that out of young people early, because that will change. Your self-interest will change. But being connected to what that means is so important when you're doing this movement work.
Thanks, Tykee. One of the thoughts that came to my mind was this, knowing that you have a self-interest in, well, certainly earning a decent living and having a job and trying to marry your livelihood with a better future. It is so important. I thank you, Tykee, for providing that for traditionally underprivileged sectors of our population. So any thoughts that you have on how we can form those allyships, to help with anything that empowers the rest of us, right? Whether it's one of the organizations that is trying to work toward and marrying livelihood with a more sustainable future, because we need to marry the individual interests with societal interests, right? So any thought you have on how to marry that, in terms of whether you want to frame it largely as marrying self-interest with societal interests, or more specifically, how do we get young people to feel like the rest of us who want to support youth empowerment have their back? We want to be there. We want to provide skills. I often try to recruit young people to CCL, saying that within CCL, you will learn the skills and knowledge that will empower you to, a better life, no matter whether you're going to be, this is not just an activist, and we're not just asking you to be an activist. We want to empower you to have that political will for a livable world.
Yeah, building that political will is really important. And maybe something I left out as well is that if you are an activist, you are acting in your own self-interest, but also that this is about self-determination. This is about your ability to decide with what resources you have that you can do whatever you want with your life. This is the idea of collective liberation as well. And that's a big term, collective liberation. You can put the words together and understand what it means, freedom for everyone. But to really understand what that means, we do have to unlayer the society that we live in to understand the waters that we swim in, right? And with the Freedom Birders Project, we take this approach by framing it with civil rights education material and bird education content. So you can check freedombirders.org right now. And the first thing I know, the color. I love periwinkle. Periwinkle is a really, really, really nice background color, but the website does need some work outside of that. And that work is going to change a little bit of what the website looks like. But when I am, thinking about what that empowerment, how do you connect this idea of, I want to achieve self-determination. I want to be able to pick whatever path I want to choose and, and receive the benefits of that path without any obstructions, without any barriers, accepting that I want to challenge the role of power in society. I break it down in 4 ways. I say Freedom Birders, bird, B-I-R-D. B, beginner minded. It's really helpful to walk into a room with an empty cup and being okay with walking away with a new perspective that you didn't walk in with. I is for inclusive and intersectional. I think those words have their own definitions, but the reason that I put them together is because it's important to think along intersecting lines, how to include people. I'm not just a Black dude. I'm left-handed as well. I contain layers. And R is for recognizing and reflective. It's always important to think about the question, how did we get here? and then reflect on how, when you see that bird, how did that bird get here? I mean, part of what birders celebrate in a rare bird is thinking about how it got here, and here can be a very special place as well. And it's important to reflect and recognize that. And then D is about being deliberate and decisive. And that is seeing that the collection of your actions are meaningful to something. The collection of your actions are for that idea of collective liberation. Just some thoughts.
Great thoughts. Thank you. Really well done. Jack, did you want to add anything to that?
I can definitely add something to that. I would say something that I like to play off of a lot is just like this collective like frustration with like and being able to display how little is being done, because like that creates like more of like, hey, what are we doing? Like, why do I have to come in here and do this for you? Like that kind of thing. And that's kind of related to government. And I was talking to you earlier about the Environmental Control Agency in our state, who doesn't really enforce any of like the permit violations that some of like the larger operations have. So the Delaware City Oil Refinery in Newcastle County dumps crap constantly, emits horrible chemicals constantly, and hasn't gotten fined for it in years or ever, really. I mean, like there really is not much going on. And it's a frustrating thing as a kid to see, right? And also, Tykee, I also kind of wanted to touch on what you said earlier about like this idea of self-determination. I think in my work, at least, I've kind of used that as a way to connect with people from across the aisle. And I think that's almost a very like a Republican ideal of like this country should be, if you work hard enough, you can get it. And that's obviously not what it is. I acknowledge that. It's not that at all. But I mean, if you can tap into that and speak to people as humans, right? Like if I can address a legislator as a human being and talk to them and be like, hey, this is something that we need as a society, and this is something that, and this is how we can do it, that kind of thing. That's been a really effective strategy for me and for Fridays for Future Delaware, at least. And some people just don't really like it. They're making too much money off stuff and all that kind of stuff. But it playing and just talking to people as human beings is really an important thing. I think that's been my strategy for really energizing people, whether it be youth legislators or anyone, really.
Thanks so much, Jack. I think Ask Me Jacob has some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I got a few questions. I guess one of the first questions was, how do you guys provide guidance while also empowering the youth?
Well, again, I look at examples of movements upon shoulders that we stand on today. Like we think about the lunch counters in Greensboro, North Carolina. What it took to desegregate and integrate that effort was young folks who obviously wanted a meal, but young folks who were tired of not having the dignity to choose where they wanted to eat. And they practiced in ways that took inspiration from organizers before them. And they took up the philosophy of nonviolent resistance. And, that has, I think, made a tremendous amount of, not just like scenic historical support. Like you look up the civil rights movement, what you think about is nonviolent resistance against direct violence. And again, those were the young folks that were stepping up and doing that. And that inspired a lot of other people to realize, well, if they can do that, if they're willing to go that far, I can step up a lot more.
Mine's probably not as profound, but whenever someone first joins my local group, Fridays for Future Delaware, I don't assign them anything. I kind of just say, hey, we can give you the resources to do what you want to do. Because, I really do understand that people are getting into this for different reasons than what I am. And I think early on, I kind of didn't really register that as much as I should have. But I mean, recently, like giving people the resources, whether that's manpower, whether that's fundraising, anything, it's really a helpful way to empower, while also kind of letting them do their own thing. And people, like I said, people do want to get into it because of something different than what I got into it. Some people want to play the conservation angle of it. Some people want to do the just chemical pollution part of it, not as much like carbon emissions, that kind of thing. So I mean, it's really inspiring to see people really take to whatever they chosen to get into.
Those were great answers, guys. Thank you. Another question we got was, how do you guys attract youth? How do you guys attract people to join your groups, to join CCL? How do you attract youth?
So they're from very different organizations. So it's not so much CCL, we're just talking about connecting with youth, because of course, youth is a very diverse set of people. And part of what we're trying to learn from is each other, how we work together. And I think part of the conversations that I've had as planning for this is helping me appreciate all the other little things that are being taken care of, right? Because none of us can do everything. And also, Jack, I feel your frustration in like the larger issues like national climate policy. We don't really have one, right? And yet when I get to work with other organizations, I appreciate so much more that we're all really trying to do the best that we can with whatever we have, wherever we are. And that really gives me a lot more perspective. Well, it gives me a better perspective and gives me a lot more courage to do the things that I think I should be doing. But anyway, I think the main question was, how do you attract youth to join, the Fridays for the Future or Amplify the Future?
Well, we started a TikTok. We're trying to bridge the divide. No, honestly, it's demonstrating with normalcy how you live up to your values. I think that what generation and generation see more and more is just like the superficial stuff, and how through generation we are seeing right through the superficial stuff to the core of what things mean. And I think what attracts people with that awareness is who's doing exactly what they say, and who's doing what they believe, and not just saying it and then doing something else, and then saying it really strongly, but then when asked again, it's like, oh, I don't know about student loan debt. Like it's something that is consistent and clear. And I think that's going to be really attractive. But honestly, TikTok does have a role. I do joke, but like it has some type of role.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it's leading by example. Like we have a lot of people who've been like raised really well and have really strong morals, and I think seeing people getting up and saying like, hey, this is wrong, and I'm not afraid to stand up and say anything about it, really does inspire them to stand up and do the same.
That's great.
Yeah. So go ahead. You have another question.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that one of the questions that I got in while you were talking about the two organizations was they want to know where they can learn more about the groups that you guys work with. Maybe there's a link we could put in the chat or something like that.
Yes, I think they have been dropped into the chat, like Freedom Birders. Mary Ellen had dropped that earlier. And then I'm sure that Tykee can quickly drop the other ones. Yes. That's great. Believe it or not, we only have 2 more minutes for this session. So if you're all right, I'd love to get in that 2 minutes. What's one thing you want the audience to take away from this discussion?
There's a lot to fight for. But there's also a lot of fun to be have when we build bridges, and when we see that solidarity is not just shared values, but it's shared actions because of those shared values.
Absolutely. I think my thing is just fight. Just fight. I mean, I don't care who you are. Honestly, I really don't. We're as long as you're here to really give everything you have for this and really put effort into it and care, and just fight. Just fight. That's my thing, So yeah, that would be my takeaway.
So Jack, I'm going to pause here and just ask to reconsider some words, because I love the energy which you want to make change. And I'm wondering if the word fight has us working against each other than working with each other, right?
I would say I use it in the sense of like, let's fight against like the established way of doing things, you know, with the status quo, more than any person in particular. You know, everybody's doing a job. Everybody's just trying to get by. And I think attacking individual people is the wrong way to go, right? But I mean, just fighting against the status quo of how we function as a society and how we don't value our resources is I think how I would phrase
But
that.
yeah, no, that's beautiful. How we really don't value our resources, including each other as resources. And
Yep.
if we could change our perspective to needing to change the system, including how we relate to each other and how we can commit to each other. I really love how I've reached out to you, the two of you, and how much you committed. I really super appreciate that. And I hope that there will be more of that commitment to each other in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you, CCL. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jake, for the questions.
All right. Thank you all.